Good day to you from OG Benchmarks. This is my backstory and the reasons I created this YouTube channel. The name of this channel is OG Benchmarks, and OG is a reference to Original Gangster. I admit that I am neither original nor a gangster, but I am older than the typical tech YouTuber. When I was getting interested in computers, the world of computing and gaming was a bit different than today. The Atari 2600 was the console system that most everyone had, although nobody called it a console. Radio Shack had put out a computer, the TRS-80. It didn't have a good reputation, and many people called it the Trash 80. I admit I didn't know anyone who had one. The Commodore 64 was pretty popular. This image shows a floppy drive, a 5 1/4 inch floppy, but these had optional cassette drives. You can imagine how reliable those were. Just a few folks had an Apple II. I had one friend with an Apple II and a couple with the Commodore. We had an IBM-PC. It was super nice and super expensive. The monitor was a green screen, and of course it had a dot matrix printer to go with it. My dad had to do a lot of accounting work with an old spreadsheet program from well before Excel. The program was called VisiCalc. Here's an example of what a big deal computers were back then. We had a dust cover that we put over the computer when we were done with it. I think we had a little one that went over the keyboard too. The IBM PC was not as game-friendly as the Apple II or Commodore. Since games were limited, I tried to learn some programming. My only option was BASIC, more properly Advanced BASIC, the brand of BASIC that worked in DOS. I learned a lot and even made this D&D Conan game, purely text-based. The problem was that BASIC had some severe memory limitations on the size of the program, and I didn't know how to get around that issue. My code ended up getting too long to load the game. And that was the end of my game developer career. Once I got to high school, programming options seemed kind of obscure to me. We didn't have any tech options at my high school. I liked chemistry, and that's what I ended up studying in college. I did have a computer in my senior year of college. It was some kind of PC from my older sister, and I was still using a dot matrix printer, which was honestly kind of obsolete by the time I was in school. After college, I went to grad school to continue studying chemistry. Other than a really short interaction with a VAX mainframe, I was only working with Macs in grad school. At the time, Macs had much better graphics, and in the sciences, you needed graphics. By the end of my PhD work, I bought a new Apple PowerBook 190 CS for about $500 from the university bookstore. I know this looks horrific from today's standards, but it was pretty nice for 1995. The 3.5 inch floppy was on the left, and the battery popped out on the right. I wrote my thesis on this thing and never realized what a terrible experience it was. With my own computer, I caught the programming bug again. Bought this book at a Borders, Amazon hadn't wiped out bookstores yet, and learned quite a bit of C. Apples, however, were not very friendly for programming, however, unless you bought a commercial compiler. I bought a product called Code Warrior. My time programming was short-lived. I got my degree, and I started working in a new lab. After a little over a year, I took a job at a small college and began teaching for full-time. I was no longer around just scientists. In our campus IT department typically gave all new faculty Windows computers. If you kicked and screamed, you could get a Mac, but I didn't want to rock the boat. I was convinced that Windows was going to be terrible, but switching over really wasn't all that bad. Coding was actually much easier in Windows than on a Mac. Most of my energy went into teaching chemistry, but I did have a chance to do a bit of coding for different projects. Coding was much easier on Windows because free compilers were available. Another boost was that new interpreted languages made compilers unnecessary. Over the next 20 years or so, I picked up some HTML, then JavaScript, which was easy with some knowledge of C, and then finally just a bit of PHP, again, really similar to C. During these 20 plus years, I had more important changes, like getting married and having kids. Fast forward to early 2020, and my son wanted a gaming computer. I did a little research, much of it on YouTube. I really wanted to build his computer, but I didn't have enough confidence, and I was a bit too chicken. We opted for a pre-built. In hindsight, we overpaid, but since we didn't exactly get a high-end system, we didn't fare too badly. Regardless, as soon as we got his pre-built, I knew I could have done better. At this point, I just had to build my own computer. I only had a laptop at home. I convinced my wife to let me get a desktop. I went the very safe route, bought a used OptiPlex for about $125 with a Gen 4 i5 and installed an SSD, more RAM, and a modest GPU. This picture is an OptiPlex 390 in a small form factor. I got a 7020 in a mid-tower. After doing an upgrade, I wanted to build a new computer from scratch. Really build a computer this time. It's not much, but I put a Celeron G5900, 10th generation Intel, into a Ranger Line M case with an H410 motherboard. No dedicated GPU. At around $250 complete, it's awesome, but it's definitely not a gaming computer. It just surfs and runs productivity software. That's fine for me. So here I am. I enjoy putting together computers, but it doesn't make sense to build computers that you don't need. And I've built enough, I don't need any more. Furthermore, even inexpensive new parts can set you back a bit. That's where older parts come into the picture. Older parts are readily available and can be downright cheap. I can work with high-end parts from back in the day, see a wider variety of hardware, and just tear down the PC to make something else. Through this channel, I can share what I learn and get tips and ideas from the PC building community. I'm excited to get started. Thank you so much for listening this far. Please like or leave a comment. If you think you like this type of content, please subscribe and come back for my later videos. Take care.